Catherine turned and ran. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete sidewalk, and she could feel the sharp edges of the cracks beneath her running shoes. She didn't look back until she was safely back inside her apartment. She locked the door and collapsed to the ground, the coolness of the hardwood floor offering some relief to her overheated body. Cupping her hands over her face, Catherine fought to keep her feelings collected together, the salty taste of her own tears mingling with the metallic tang of fear in her mouth. She couldn't help it. Her runny nose, racing heart, rapid breathing. It was all too much. Catherine kept her eyes closed, but the only thing she could see was the flashing lights that read LOL, their ghostly glow imprinted on her vision. Catherine made her way over toward the window of her apartment and pushed the curtains aside. Looking out at the intersection below, she could see in the distance that the traffic light was still flashing LOL. The arrow was still pointing at her. Catherine slammed the curtains closed and went to her bedroom. Lying in bed, Catherine tossed and turned. Her thoughts could not be settled. She choked with pain and guilt. How did the light know? Who was controlling the traffic light? No one knew about her secret. It was only one little text. Catherine closed her eyes and remembered. She was driving home from her friend Claire's house. It was super late at night. Catherine had her radio on, blasting music and singing along. A text notification flashed onto her dashboard. Catherine looked down to see Claire's text with just a quick glance. "It was great to see you tonight." The text read. Catherine smiled. It had been a fun night. She looked at her screen as her fingers wavered over the keyboard and replied, LOL. The car lurched forward with a thud. What was that? Catherine wondered. It felt like something had gone under her tires. Catherine stopped the car. Reluctantly, she unfastened her seatbelt and got out. Catherine clenched her chest, her heart pounding so loudly that she could hear each beat, like a drum in her ears. She could feel the rapid thump of her heart reverberate through her ribcage. There was something lying under the eerie flickering light of the traffic light. Her breath hitched in her throat as she turned to her car, its front end mangled and dented. A trickle of crimson blood dripped down her front tire, forming a sinister, glistening pool on the asphalt. The metallic scent of blood mingling with the faint smell of exhaust fumes. She took hesitant steps forward, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. The air was thick with an unsettling combination of exhaust fumes and the metallic tang of blood. As she approached the figure, it became painfully clear that it was just a child. The cold, damp night air seemed to pierce her skin as she knelt beside him, the breeze carrying a faint hint of distant sirens. What was he doing out at night all alone? Catherine whispered, her voice trembling. Are you okay? She asked, her words dissipating into the darkness. There was no response, only an eerie stillness that seemed to hang in the air. Fear surged through her, and she turned and ran back to her car. What had she been thinking? This was insane. She drove off with a rush, the engine's roar filling the night as she sped all the way until she got home. The sound of the car's tires on the road seemed to echo in her ears long after she'd parked in her driveway. That night, Catherine immersed herself in a relentless cleaning spree. The pungent scent of cleaning supplies intermingled with the constant undercurrent of her own apprehension. With each scrub, the rhythmic cadence of her actions echoed in the room, a disconcerting backdrop that only accentuated the relentless ticking of the clock. She waited, the silence in her apartment growing heavy and oppressive. Would anyone come around asking questions? Would the police arrest her? The minutes dragged on like an eternity, each one a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. Catherine opened her eyes, the room bathed in the pale glow of the moonlight seeping through her curtains. She reached for her phone, her trembling fingers navigating to her contacts. She called her mother, her voice shaky as she asked if she could go home for the weekend. She lied, her words laced with desperation. Catherine didn't want to ever come back. It was a mistake to move to this new city by herself. She needed to leave now. She was not going to wait for this traffic light to kill her. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears as she looked at flights out of the city. There was still one for tonight, the anticipation of escape hanging in the air like a lifeline. It would be taking off in 3 hours. Catherine ignored the expensive price and bought the ticket. No cost was worth losing her life. Catherine immediately ordered the rideshare to pick her up at her apartment, her pulse quickening with each passing second. Ever since she had run over that little child, she had vowed to never drive again. The rideshare was only a few minutes away, and the anticipation was palpable as she stuffed a jumbled mess of clothes into her backpack and ran downstairs. There it was, the electric vehicle, waiting for her in the dimly lit street. Catherine got into the back of the car, the scent of leather filling her nostrils. She sighed with relief when she saw that the police had been directing traffic around the broken traffic light. Even then, she felt nervous crossing under the intersection, a shiver running down her spine. Catherine held her breath as the police directed her driver to pass the intersection, her gaze fixed on the illuminated screen of her phone. They made it through, and Catherine sighed with relief. She was going to be safe. The faint hum of the electric vehicle's engine added to the surreal atmosphere. Catherine went on her phone, her fingers trembling as she navigated the ride-sharing app. It was still open, but it showed a notification message from her driver. They were texting her. She clicked on it. LOL, Catherine gasped, her heart rate spiking. She looked forward, her eyes widening in terror. There was no driver in the front seat. Messages were pouring through from her driver, each LOL feeling like a sinister taunt, a cruel joke. "Stop the car! Stop the car!" Catherine screamed, her voice a desperate plea. The car, with its artificial intelligence, paid no heed to her distress. It started to speed up, the sensation of acceleration pressing her back into the leather seats. The sleek, polished interior seemed to close in around her as the car continued to send her messages. LOL, 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 LOL. Catherine tugged at the handle of the car door, but it was no use. It was as if the vehicle had become an inescapable prison. Panic rose within her, and she unbuckled her seatbelt, trying to grab the steering wheel and wrest control of the car, but the wheel remained unyielding, a cold, immovable presence. Catherine felt her heart racing, the thud of each beat echoing through her. The car continued to speed, the world outside a blur of indistinct shapes. The wind rushing past created a deafening roar, and her own frantic breathing filled her ears. The entire world became a surreal, nightmarish blur as Catherine understood her life was coming to an end. This was her punishment for her decisions. She deserved this. There was a tree ahead, its dark silhouette looming ominously. The car did not falter, and the inevitable impact came with a sickening, bone-crushing thud. Bang! Catherine was thrown straight through the windshield of the car, the shattering glass and the force of the impact disorienting her. She smacked against a tree, her body and the tree becoming one in a jarring collision. Blood erupted from her throat, the metallic taste mingling with the acrid scent of gasoline and the earthy aroma of damp soil. Catherine couldn't feel anything, her senses overwhelmed by pain and shock. The high beams of the car started flashing, casting a flickering, ghostly light on the scene. The license plate of the car read, LOL, a chilling epitaph to the night's horrors. Catherine lost consciousness, the world around her fading into a hazy, dreamlike darkness.